Let's talk about menu-driven programs. This is from chapter 11 in the Gaddis book. So menu-driven programs are very simple. We're going to cover a couple of different steps in how to do this. We've already done some examples of this in some assignments, and we've seen this in some of the content using very simple menus, but we're just going to run through some of the principles. So very simply, a menu is a list of options that you give the user to let them choose different functionality from your program. So in our case, we're writing console menus. So we're writing text menus that run on the console, but a menu on an app on your smartphone or on your computer is the same principle. So it's just there are lots of options and menus, whether it's a drop-down menu in a file bar or an icon on an app. Those are all menus. So the principles of how to deploy a menu and how to react to the menu are basically the same. Just even though the user interface or the visualization of the menu might look different depending on the platform. So we always have a set of options, and then we use the decision structure to choose which one. Typically, a case structure is usually the best way to do this. Simply because you have a switch case in Java, because you have a small number of options or a limited number of options. Maybe it's not a small number, but it's a limited number of options. So using a case structure is typically the fastest way to do that. And that's what we've done. We've seen that in some of the examples that we've done in this class. Here's what the flowchart would look like. You can see at this point that the flowcharts are beginning to get very complex. So this is a flowchart of the case structure with different menu options that you see there. So validation-wise, you do have to make a validation. So if you put 5 options on the menu, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have to make sure that if they choose 6 or Z or Q or something like that, and that's not one of the options, that you have to tell them that that was an invalid choice. Invalid options are not on graphical menus. They don't really apply because if the option is not valid at that moment, you don't display it on the graphic, or you just turn it off. And so since it's picking from a list instead of text entry, you don't always have that. But when you're doing text entry, you need to make sure that you always have some kind of validation on what was entered, so that you don't get an error. So you should also use lots of modules for this. So my approach is to use a different module for every menu. So if I have option 1, it's going to call a module that's going to process option 1, whatever that might be. Maybe it's to do some, and then that to do some input and output. Maybe it's a little processing. Maybe it just, we've done them with mathematical formulas and things like that. So always use a sub module. You really want to have lots and lots of modules in your program. It can be too short. If you have a module that only has 1 line in it, that's probably too short unless it's doing something really unique or useful. But typically, you don't want any module in your program to be more than 15, 20 lines long. If it's getting longer than that, then you probably need to be looking at how to cut that down into more submodules. The one exception there might be the main module, which might get a little longer, but really, in truth, you really don't want any of these modules to be very long. 15, 20, 25 lines at the most for the most complex modules. And really, even if you're at that point, I would be looking for ways to cut it down. I really like 10 and under. I mean, that's kind of the sweet spot, particularly at the level that we're writing. That would be the goal, 10 lines and under, but definitely not more than 20, 25. So, but you want to have lots and lots of modules in the code, and you also want to be looking for ways to reuse modules. So we've seen that where we're doing input, where we have input for specific data types that meet certain criteria, get integer between values, etc. So get in and range, things like that. Those are really useful modules that reduce the overall amount of code in our program. So here's another example of flowchart. You typically use a loop, and so one of the menu options is to quit. So here we have option 4 here to end the program. So we've seen that in some examples as well. We also have multi-level menus. So sometimes if you have a lot of options in your menu, you want to have a menu option to display another menu. So And we'll see that in some examples we're doing. Sometimes the submenu is a list of data that you want to select from or operate on. And so think of like a contact program. You have an option to search contacts. You choose that option and you're displayed with a list of contacts. And now you can tap on one of those. That list of contacts is essentially a menu, asking you to select one of the contact options for then you to do whatever action you want on it. So so we have submenus that we want to break up. Here's an example of a text menu. Lots of different options here. There's 10 options on this menu, but that's really a lot. And so you see it's kind of there's a little bit of context to it. There's these are prints, there's modifications and things like that. So here you can really break it up. So we have a main menu with 4 options, and then this option 1, process a sale or return, would simply display the submenu. So this helps the user to kind of navigate through a complex menu with a little more ease. They don't have to look at so much at once in order to do that. So here's the rest of the menu that you would see. So we go from 10 options to 4 options with 3 submenus. The 10 options are still there. We've just presented it to the user in a way that's a little easier to understand, a little easier to digest. Okay, so the principles apply to each of those menus. So if you have a multi-level menu, then you're going to when you take that menu option, we're going to display the submenu. You're usually going to use a sub method to do that, or sub procedure to do that, and it will look just like the main menu. It's going to have a while true clause. It's going to loop, and it's going to have input validation. It's going to display the menu, etc. And so it's so every time you have a menu, the structure is going to look the same, whether it's the main menu or a submenu. Okay, so here's some quick Java examples. I'm not going to dwell on this because we've seen this several times in our work. But you get the idea here. Display menu. Here's a while loop to get the menu options, etc. And here's an example of the case statements. In this case, they're not calling modules. They should really be calling a module here inside each of these cases instead of doing it in line. You see how long this code is, this public static void main? I mean, this is a lot of code. I'm not sure how many lines this is, but it's a lot, and it's too many. So here I would break this case up. I would break each of these cases. I would put all of this code into a separate procedure. Okay, that's it for menu driven. We'll see some examples in subsequent videos.